little bit of extra time for others to join us before we kick off the webinar. So again, thank you and good afternoon. My name is Chantel Bartlett. I'm the manager of Member Engagement Programs for SME. We are so very excited to kick off Manufacturing Day and Month celebrations with today's really important webinar, Empowering the Future, Planting the Seeds of Careers. I want to welcome our SME members, guests, and most particularly our webinar panelists today. I am extremely appreciative of your time and your dedication to this webinar and imparting your knowledge and your experience and sharing the amazing things that you are doing in your communities. I know everyone will find great value in the program and discussion today. So before we begin, let's go over a couple housekeeping items for the program. All attendees are muted today to help minimize background noise. We encourage you to use the chat box feature throughout today's program, and we will address as many of your questions and comments as we can throughout the program. Today's event is being recorded, and a replay will be circulated to all attendees, and it will be found on the SME Connect virtual platform as well. For any post-event questions, feel free to email SME membership at sme.org. So SME is so excited to support the Manufacturing Day and Month and foster collaboration between manufacturers and young innovators. This month highlights the vital role of manufacturing locally, nationally, and globally. It brings companies together to connect with and inspire the next generation of professionals. At SME, we back initiatives that drive the industry forward, and we're proud to be a part of Manufacturing Day and Month. Today's program will cover real-world impact. Learn how industry leaders are actively making a difference through engagement with youth and how these efforts are shaping the future of manufacturing. Expert advice. You'll get actionable tips and guidance directly from seasoned professionals on how to transform the manufacturing sector into a thriving environment for the next generation of leaders. Talent attraction strategies. Discover what additional measures are needed to attract and engage emerging talent in manufacturing, and to learn effective strategies to generate greater interest and enthusiasm among communities. It is always my pleasure to introduce our facilitator for today's program, my colleague, Tony Neary. Tony is the Director of Community Engagement and Workforce Innovation at SME. She leads efforts to grow diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, as well as highlighting successful programs throughout the United States. Passionate about career and technical education, she has spent nearly 20 years engaging, developing, and helping to grow advanced manufacturing programs through various roles. In her current position, Tony works directly with communities to build, fill, and sustain viable manufacturing ecosystems. Tony speaks on many platforms to help raise awareness and change perceptions of careers and pathways to manufacturing, as well as creating vital links between industry and educators to develop a strong, consistent workforce pipeline. So at this time, I have the pleasure of turning the program over to Tony.
Thank you so much, Chantel. And I want to start by thanking our entire SME team for putting together this webinar and for asking me to participate. And then I just want to take a minute. I'm so excited for today's program. And while we could spend hours discussing this topic, today we're going to do more of a high-level overview of the manufacturing labor shortage and discuss how promoting diversity can actually help our industry overcome this challenge. We have 4 amazing panelists joining me today, providing a wealth of knowledge for a deep dive into planting the seeds of careers. First up, we have Cara Branch. She is the founder and CEO of Black Girls Do Engineer, an award-winning nonprofit that empowers young women in STEM fields through mentorship and career guidance. With a background in chemical engineering, Cara's work has been recognized nationally, and she's dedicated to increasing diversity and representation in STEM. Cara, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you just tell us a little bit about your organization and your inspiration?
Yes, absolutely. So, as you mentioned already, Tony, I am a chemical engineer by degree. I worked in industry for over 8 years. I started in oil and gas, transitioned as a manager in the space industry, as well as I was an engineering manager for a Fortune 100 tech company. Outside of that, I am a mom. So, I have three daughters of my own. My eldest is now 14, but when she was 9, she told me she wanted to become a software engineer. And I wanted to create a platform for her and girls who look like her to come together and do just that. Working as an engineer in the field, I have always been the only Black woman in my roles. So I really wanted to be able to help her and my daughters, who are all going into STEM, be able to have a program like Black Girls Do Engineers. So, what it is that we do, we're a membership based organization. We start as early as 6 years old, all the way up to 21 is who we support. We're headquartered in Houston, Texas, is where our home is, and we are most definitely on the national track this year. So we've been a little bit of everywhere. And our program really offers three pillars. And so that membership is where girls join into our programs. Our second pillar really supports community. So we host on average about 30 community events each year. And when we're not working with girls in the community, we are supporting our educators. And we do that by offering STEM education, workshop development around all things STEM. And then we also create projects for students and schools to do. So that just provides a summary of who we are here at Black Girls Do Engineer.
How amazing, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Next up, we have a good friend of mine and colleague that I've known for many years, and that's Shanali Ditz. Shanali's the co-founder and executive director of Spark Shop, and she's running a nonprofit that's bringing hands-on STEM education to fourth and fifth graders across the greater Chicago area. And with a background in the automotive industry, Shanali's mission to inspire underrepresented youth to pursue careers in STEM. She's here to share her passion for reshaping the future of engineering through education. Shanali, thank you for joining us. And do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and Spark Shop?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tony. So yeah, my degree is in manufacturing and design engineering. I worked in the automotive industry right out of school, and I have a co-founder at Spark Shop who worked in the manufacturing industry with a biomedical engineering background. So she and I spent some time, in the jobs that we thought we were going to have, that we went to college for. And then around the same time, had this feeling like we really aren't seeing the change we want to see when it comes to the demographics of who is finding success and opportunity in the STEM fields. So we started Spark Shop in 2017 with the goal of bringing everything we loved about the engineering and manufacturing fields into Chicago classrooms and working with students who aren't reached by other STEM programs. Since then, we've grown quite a bit. So we're now a team of 7 working across 40 schools in Chicago. I'm really excited to be here talking about it.
Absolutely amazing. And I think the growth that we're seeing in support of programs like yours and some of our other guests today is just, it's what we need. Next up, we have Shireen Hafiz, and Shireen is the founder of Deaf Kids Code, a groundbreaking nonprofit that teaches deaf and hard of hearing children the technology skills they need to succeed. Her work has impacted thousands of students, breaking down barriers and creating new opportunities for the deaf community. Shireen, thank you so much for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about your org and your inspiration. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you
There you
so
go.
much for having me. It's an honor to be here, especially with October being National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So spot on. Started the organization in 2015, but I am the mother of a child that was born with severe hearing loss. So the catalyst for starting this organization was very personal. Our mission is that we promote computer science, technology, and design thinking skills to kids who are deaf and hard of hearing. But of course, disabilities is intersectional, and that it's not just one thing, but it can be that somebody who is deaf and autistic as well. So I just want to preface that. We have worked with over 16,000 students in over 60 locations across the country and in pockets around the world. And we provide hands-on interactive learning experiences. And most of our programming is led by a deaf role model whose background is probably technology, engineering, of a variety of, these background skills.
Absolutely amazing. And I'm excited to share my daughter will be starting high school next year and picked ASL as her language.
Oh,
Which is
she should
amazing. I was like,
volunteer. She should
she is-
volunteer.
she's going into the medical field. And she said,
I
could you
love it.
imagine, being a doctor and actually being able to communicate with individuals? So it's like, it hits very close to me that it's like, oh my gosh, what an impactful, amazing program. And then
Beautiful.
last but not least on our speakers today, we have John Cranston. And John is the state coordinator of Bird Inc. at Auburn University and has over 40 years experience in engineering and education. So he now focuses really on inspiring middle school students through hands-on STEM programs while highlighting careers in manufacturing and teamwork. And his work has impacted thousands of students across Alabama. John, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about Bird Inc. and what inspired you to help work with the future workforce.
Yeah, Bird Inc. started in about 1994, but the brainchild of that was an experience 10 years before that when I first started working at NASA as a technician. At that time in my 30s, I still didn't have a degree. I had patents on stuff flying in space, and I go, I don't seem to be compensated for what I'm doing and contributing. So I started working with some mechanical engineering students at University of Alabama in Huntsville. I volunteered to train them on the things that I was learning, and we started building racing bicycles. We actually built a 1992 racing wheelchair with the backing of NASA for the Paralympics down in New Orleans. And we kept winning all these races and setting world records, but we weren't making any money doing it. So I go, there's got to be some other way to help children. So when I got the contract, it was a government contract during the Clinton administration for school to work, I started thinking, how in the world did John Cranston end up in the space business, Because I was actually, before 1984, for 10 years, I was a leather craftsman hippie traveling around living in a van with my wife and I. So it's kind of a big difference for us to be in aerospace and influencing young engineers. So I go, how did I get there? And that's how Bird Inc. happened. I'm always interested in materials and manufacturing. So I was solving some problem. I was the tech transfer guy at NASA for a contract, and I was trying to solve problems in industry. And somebody gave me a mold and said, hey, I need some new molding materials. And I was like, I just patented some foam that you see in those owls there on the picture. And I go, well, if I take that mold and that owl and I go trying to pretend I'm having a manufacturing thing, can I turn that into it? And it turned into the 50-minute factory where we go into a classroom and the students actually engage. They have positions in the company. They're accountable. They're trained and accountable for the success of that company. It's engineered to fail. So they have to use their brain to solve the problem. So they have to use their brains too, as well as information and education. And we've talked since 1994, we've talked to nearly 28,000 children. And now I have the goal to turn this into a national program with the seed funding to speak to the next 28,000 students in Alabama. And that's what I'm doing right now.
Absolutely amazing. And I recently heard the analogy of fail is first attempt in learning, and I use it every single opportunity I have the chance, because I think it's so important that we're teaching students that failure is an option, and it's called an iteration. So the more iterations you have, as long as you're failing up, it's a really good thing. Perfect. Well, I'm so excited. We're going to take a deep dive with each of our guests today, and we're going to start with Cara. Cara, you've made an incredible impact empowering young women in STEM fields, helping them really envision and achieve their goals by seeing others like them doing it. From your beginnings in chemical engineering to creating a national nonprofit, your journey alone has been very inspiring. So we've talked a little bit about you creating the vision for your daughters and other young Black girls to see women in this empowering engineering field. How has your personal experience as a Black woman in STEM really shaped your vision and your drive for your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a very small town. I come from Port Arthur, Texas, right? And when being a youth, I tell people one of my favorite stories is that I was always a smart kid. I received a lot of awards as a kid. And people always told my mom that I was very, very, very smart, but no one ever told my mom what to do with her smart daughter. So we didn't have the resources. My mom was a single mom doing the best that she can, working multiple jobs to provide for us. And so I always knew that college was something for me. Didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I always wanted to go. And so it wasn't really until my freshman year that I even learned of college that I've learned that I could be a chemical engineer. I fell in love with chemistry. Like in ninth grade, one of my teachers was putting balancing equations on the board, and it just made sense to me. I just understood how to do it. And then she challenged his father in science. And I remember we took at the time a tax test at the time that we took it here in Texas. And she had said whoever passed their science portion of their tax test will be exempt from their final. And I was the only person in my class who did. And then that's when I realized, oh my God, I really get this science thing. So I really went into college knowing that I love science. I was just good at math. And but I really went in with the understanding that I was going to be a dance major. I had danced throughout high school, and I was like, I'm going to go dance and I'm going to become Usher's background dancer. That was my goal.
I love it.
Until I sat down with my advisor, and my aunt had called me up and said, that's not what you're going to do. So I had to figure out what that was. So she showed me the catalog for engineering, and that's when I was like, I think chemical engineering. And I said, I want to go for that. And so my journey was I didn't have mentors. I didn't have resources to even know it was an opportunity. And so when I went into my career, coming from a very minority community, I went to HBCU University. I had always been around people who look like me. And so going into the space, we've had people come back and say, it's not that many of us there. But I was like, no, it couldn't be, because I see us every day. But going into my first job and realizing I'm the only Black woman there is when it hit me. So I had to learn how to not just adjust to doing what I love in this space, but also doing it where I wasn't really as comfortable. I started to change everything about myself to fit into the space. The colors that I wear now, I would have never wore this when I first started in industry. And so I had to go from changing everything about me and just doing great work, which was not always the happiest setting, but I love being an engineer. I loved innovation. I love creating things. I really just love my program. So I was going to do it. And it wasn't until my daughter really approached me that I talked about what mommy did. I never even talked about being an engineer at home or the projects I was working on because of all the challenges that I was facing in industry, with just having identity of who I was in this space. And so when she expressed that to me, and I know now I have two of my daughters that's working to STEM towards STEM degrees, that I had to do this for them. This had to happen for them first because I wanted them to have a better experience than I ever had. But also, I wanted to be able to open doors for girls because I also noticed working in corporate, leading ERG groups and corporations, that when children would come in, none of them looked like me. And so I knew that that was a problem from doing a lot of leadership in industry. So I wanted to go after all that I knew, and just my kids wanting to go into this space to really create a great program for them.
And I love that because I always, I have a 13 and 14-year-old, and I always give them the analogy. If you walk in a room and there's nobody that looks like you, what is the first thing you think? And it's, am I in the wrong place? Do I belong here? So I make it a point for my kids, if they see somebody walk into a room that does not look like them, that they are like a magnet of like, hey, what do you need to be here? Like, let me teach you, some of these other people that I know, and let me help you maneuver the way, because it really is, the industry looks different now than 20 years ago when I started, when there were a lot of women in the industry at all. But I can't imagine being a woman of color walking into a room and it's like, wait a minute, there's literally nobody who looks like me here. And really having that feeling of being on an island, not just to being a female, but also being a woman of color that's doing things that come very naturally to you, that suddenly you're like questioning, wait a minute, why is that working for me? Let's talk a little bit about representation and mentorship with STEM fields. I know from what Shonali has taught me over the years that girls are starting to really create that STEM identity before second and third grade. So why is this particularly important when we look at young women of color and really creating more of that inclusive and innovative industry?
Yeah, because they've truly never seen it. So I can give experiences. So I've been doing this program since 2019. I've impacted over 4,000 girls since I've started. And the number one question I start off in every event, every meeting I host with my girls and girls in the community is, how many of you have ever seen a Black woman who's a chemical engineer? And none of them ever raised their hand. This is foreign to them. This is something they've never seen in my community. So representation is very important. You have to see someone who looked like you to make you feel like you can do it. And for me, it was very later on in life, just watching Hidden Figures. Like, I idolize those women now from hearing their story. And it made my day of going into work feel like I'm not the only one feeling this way, right? Working in industry and having people to look up to and seeing their stories to know that I can do it too. So that's exactly what it gives the youth. It's most definitely needed. And it gets them excited about it. So when they see people who look like them doing it and very proud to be doing it and sharing their stories with them, it really makes them want to go after it. And I've seen that with our program. We have 100% college success rate. All of our girls are going into STEM fields. They're very clear on which branch of STEM they want to go into. And they're having a happy journey and really getting to achieve those goals. But it took really for them to be in the room working hands-on with women who look like them, women who are confident in this space, and really challenging them. Because we tell them, yes, this is hard. Becoming a STEM professional is very much so hard. But challenging them and letting them lead and following behind them has really been impactful for sure
I
with
love
our
that.
program.
And I love the fact that you're starting with these girls as young as 6, and you mentioned up to the age of 21. We know it can take 7 contacts sometimes to make an impression with an individual. Can you talk a little bit about key strategies you're using to really sustain this interest in STEM that you're helping to create for these young women?
Yeah, so one thing that our program did a really great job of is building our own licensed curriculum that we know that works. And so we're able to meet them at every different level that they're at and provide them with activities that's going to engage them at every different age group. So that has been the success of our program. And we know it works because our girls have pretty much grown up in this program. And they all feel challenged. And then if they need to be challenged more, we bring in something always new to do that. So the licensed curriculum has been huge as supporting our program, for sure. So I would think that is something I would have to credit. When we first started, we just went out there. Like most people just got on the ground. Like my parents is the ones who pushed me. When I first went on social media and posted who we were and what we are going to be doing, we started getting a whole bunch of followings. And the things that parents said to me first is, where do we meet? So they pushed me to get that location to meet. And because of that, we've been able to just get on the ground and do what we do best. But now we've had the time now, since we're going into year 6, we have really built this program to be a tool that really is bringing in those great success rates and making great impact.
I love it. And then the programs you've created, you're helping so many young women with 0 prior experience with STEM really excel, such as the NASAWare Challenge. Will you tell me what the NASAWare Challenge is and what some of that advice that you have for people that are maybe feeling intimidated in fields like engineering, technology, and STEM?
Yeah, so our very first year, we took 4 girls who had no background in STEM, and we put them in the NASAWare Challenge. So at that time, the NASAWare Challenge focused on the mission to Mars, and our goal with that project was to create a prototype to help astronauts against radiation in space. So you had the option of a headgear or body protection. And so our girls, we entered them in and they were able to go after the headgear. We took them through just really understanding what the engineering design process is and how to use your critical thinking skills to be able to get to your end results. And so we went from selecting materials to actually building this prototype to actually helping them do presentations to the team at NASA. And so they had to go through many rounds of that challenge. And our girls end up being one of the final winners at the end, beating out 70 plus teams that was in that challenge. So we've done other things outside of that. We've written white papers for the Department of Energy, and these are girls who are in middle and high school. And they do a lot of great challenges, but other things they've done in our program is that we have our own symposiums as well. So we have girls as young as 6 years old that's presenting to STEM professionals in those events as well.
Absolutely mind-blowing. So now, before we wrap up with you, I want to know, how can educators, parents, and industry professionals learn from you and work together to create more pathways into STEM for young girls, young women, and especially those in predominantly minority communities?
Absolutely. I always tell people you can most definitely reach out to us at info@blackgirlsdoengineer.org. And that's way we can see what your direct need, especially as educators, as you're trying to figure it out. We can help you navigate to what that need is and build around it. But as far as parents and everyone, I would say go to our website, blackgirlsdoengineer.org, so you can learn about who we are and what we've done and the impact we've made. And we're heavy on social media. So always follow us on social media. And that's really important as we move around so people can see where it is that we go next. I can tell you we're headquartered in Houston, but our next event will be in Austin, Texas in November 2nd. So that's where we'll be next. But the way to figure out where that is and those announcements is really through social media. And we're on Meta, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Tell me there's a donate button on there too.
There is. As soon as you
Perfect.
get to that website, it pops right on up for you to
Fantastic.
donate and
'Cause
give.
what do we need? We need more funding. When do we need it? Yesterday, right? All of these programs are just
Absolutely.
amazing, and rely on the support of those that have the capability to do it. Thank you so much, Cara. Next
Thank
up, we're going
you.
to spend a couple of minutes with Shonali Ditz, the co-founder of Spark Shop. And if you have any questions for Cara, go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we'll make sure that we've got those ready for our Q&A. So, Shonali, you co-founded Spark Shop back with Tiernan with the mission of bringing hands-on STEM education to young students across Chicago, and you've already impacted over 6,000 students. And I know that included a big pivot in 2020 in the way that you were delivering your STEM solutions. From your beginnings as an engineer in the automotive industry, kind of looking around and not seeing anybody that looked or thought like you, right? It's not even just the looking, it's the thinking like you as well, and how that limits innovation. Tell us a little bit about, the goals of what Spark Shop originally set out for, and maybe how those have grown and developed over the last several years.
Sure. Yeah, so Spark Shop, I mean, it's changed so much, but initially our vision was really like, how do we bring all the fun that we found in the engineering field into classrooms, into kids, really centered in the goal of changing the face of the industry. And I think one of the big ways that that's transformed the more time we spend around young students and their teachers and their families is realizing that, some of these students will find their way into STEM. Many of them won't. It's not for everyone, but those students are also building really valuable skills, right? We can use an engineering mindset in any career, in any field. We can become more comfortable with failure, more comfortable with inventing in ambiguity and solving problems. And those sort of skills shouldn't be gatekept to the science fields. So our sort of pivot in our approach to education has really moved that way, and just the development of a young person. And then how we implement the programs, of course, changed so much in the pandemic. Like, we really were a traveling circus those first couple years, with our machinery and our cars driving around to different schools. And as soon as that wasn't possible with the COVID pandemic, we had to do something different. And what we landed on has been so much more scalable and successful. So we've been delivering curriculum units to teachers along with kits of materials for every student, so they have their supplies to really practice engineering in the classroom.
And I would have to imagine the transition from a full-time career in engineering to founding and running a nonprofit focused on education. How did your background in the automotive industry really help shape that vision for you for Spark Shop?
Yeah, we were super systematic about like what we were gonna do. I feel like we had a lot of plans, but I will say they were kind of short-term plans. I look back on me and Tiernan being at the time like 23 and 26, and I don't really think we knew how much of a departure this would be from our skill set. I think we saw, I've had some experience fundraising. I was a Girl Scout. I've done things, which is like ludicrous to the scale that we're operating at now. But I think we had just enough confidence and just enough ignorance to what was to come that we felt able to start. And I will say, like, the engineering background helped so much in thinking through the logistics of everything and also speaking the language of the industry, right? We were really passionate early on that the kids who are not receiving the STEM programs that are out there do not have access to them because of historic inequities when it comes to wealth and funding in schools. So we knew if we want to go into schools that don't have funding, it has to come from somewhere. And our industry is thriving and growing and profitable and suffering from the output of these problems where there isn't enough talent, there isn't enough diversity within that talent. So we really wanted to speak that language, draw those resources down to disinvested communities, put that money and opportunity in, and coming out of engineering helped us do that. I'll also say, like, our experience just with design thinking and innovation helped so much because, like, STEM is not a new idea. We were not the first people to think, like, this should happen differently. More kids would like this. So our challenge was really setting up our differentiators early and knowing what are we going to do differently to make the impact we want to see, to do it faster, and to make ourselves known in a space that has a lot of big players already.
And you had significant growth since starting now. I believe your team's at 7. You've been expanding your team and developing all of these unique engineering moments. I don't even want to say lessons plan, but moments for students. What strategies have you found are most effective in really boosting that student's confidence and interest in STEM at a young age?
Yeah. A big part of how we do it is really focusing on What are their existing interests? What are the things they like to do, the things they feel good at, and how can we connect that to STEM? And in that way, we're allowing them to sort of transfer some confidence over and realize like, oh, hey, I could totally do this. I'm equipped, I'm able, it's interesting. Rather than starting from zero, throwing them a bunch of jargon, a bunch of technical terms that feel really alien. And something that can happen if we kind of dive in too deep is some kids will know it, right? Some kids will be familiar with these concepts, they'll dive right in. And for those quieter students in the back of the room who feel like, oh my gosh, how am I going to catch up? That divide starts to happen, right? That we see at every point in the pipeline. So we really focus on demystifying STEM and showing them just as much variety as we can. Like we're working with fourth and fifth graders. They are really little, but they're capable of a lot and they're really curious and they're still pretty brave when it comes to sharing an idea that might not work or something their peers might not like. Like that gets harder and harder as you get older. So what we do in our program is expose them to 8 different careers throughout fourth and fifth grade. So they're not just doing a bridge challenge, right? Like some of us might have in high school when we thought about engineering. They're learning biomedical engineering, manufacturing engineering, electrical, aerospace, and more to get to 8. I feel like I'm always going to repeat myself if I try to do them all without it in front of me. But our hope is that the students see whatever it is they care about, engineers are working on that. And then we also bring in humanities lessons. They're thinking about how arts and music and games and PE and movement can all connect to themes in those fields because every student is not going to be an engineer, but we want them to still know what we do and that they might in their lifetime work with engineers, work alongside them, be in the field. So we just try to go as broad as possible.
And I think it's amazing the work that you're doing and the impact that you're looking at. And you're looking at continued growth over the coming year. And I know a brick and mortar, right? We're going to be opening up a facility for Spark Shop in Chicago. But what advice do you have for other organizations that are having an impact, but they're looking to scale and they really want to grow working with these underrepresented communities?
Yeah. Um, I would say our approach to growth has always been a focus on quality, right? And growing where there is need, and there is so much need in our city and the world. Um, but it is very hard to scale educational programs and maintain quality and maintain connection when we know a lot of the value that comes out of our work, and with many others on the panel, this is true, is role modeling, right? And connection and that confidence building has to feel personal. And so something that we've both or I guess struggled with and made great like sort of protections for are like keeping the quality of the program as we get bigger and investing in people, not just materials. I think that's such an important overlooked thing, especially in the nonprofit world. We are squeezed from all sides to keep costs really low. And we are pressured by funders to grow, grow, grow. And so I would encourage folks, like if you have something amazing, grow it and keep it amazing. Don't just grow for the sake of growth. I also think when it has come to keeping our programs really strong, as we get bigger, a lot of that comes to centering the voice of students and teachers and making sure that anytime we're changing stuff, we are talking with them and we're figuring out if it's still meeting their needs. I'll say with teachers, it can be tough because they are used to making stuff work. They are used to getting not quite what they need and putting it together. And so when we were in the classroom, we saw really naturally, like, what are the accommodations they're making? What changes are they putting together? What isn't working? And now that the programs look more professional, we're not necessarily there all the time. It is harder to get honest feedback. So it could be months going by before we realize, like, hey, these boxes actually kind of fell apart, or a bunch of them came squished, or some of the batteries were dead. And that's the kind of thing that we want to know because we want every student to be receiving the best program possible. So we have really invested on trying to bring in more staff to do the field teaching and to do drop-ins and to do coffees with teachers to get that honest feedback and keep us really aligned to our mission as we grow.
I love that. And I was going to say, I think one of the most important things that we probably need to talk about is early exposure, because it does make a significant difference, especially for individuals with different backgrounds and maybe very, very limited exposure to STEM experience and STEM education, STEM equipment, and confident STEM teachers. Can you talk a little bit about early exposure for STEM and the difference and the impact that that can have?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we know, also research shows at every step of the pipeline, we're seeing kids kind of drop out of their interest of STEM along these racial and gendered lines. And so we know, right? We know what it takes to help a student start to express this interest and fully reach a career path. A huge piece of that, or pieces of that, are confidence and identity, right? That feeling that they are there, they're capable, they're going to kick ass, and they're going to belong. Like that is so important to toughing it out through like a pretty hard pipeline. And then also the identity piece is having that inner knowledge that like you are an engineer. That is a thing that no one can take from you, that you are able to do and know. It is so much easier to build that when you're young than it is further down your life. And we know that these fields can be pretty exclusive, pretty exclusionary. The push towards diversity is relatively recent. So there are many people in the field that did not grow up with this mindset at all. And so it's super important that our students have this rock solid sense of self and confidence that is not chipped away at by the societal forces around them. And we know in elementary schools when kids start to develop their sense of self around school, right? Being a math kid, being a science kid, hating reading, all of that gets locked in so early in our classes. We think about how much reading and math and science we've really done by the time we're 10, but we're making those choices about ourselves. So our approach is really in getting in there and showing them you are so able to do this, right? If it's what you want to do, it is there for you. And that sort of confidence is something it's very personal to me as well, because I feel like my dad's an engineer. That's true of most engineers. Like at least one of our parents was in this field. Um, and so I feel like I had a ton of confidence. I was a math and science kid. I went to a great school. I got into Northwestern. And as soon as I got there, my grades were terrible. So I had not had a very rigorous high school experience. And immediately my confidence took a hit. Before I knew like any of the research or really what was happening and why, I felt that nagging feeling of like, oh, I'm not as good as everyone else here. I'm not as smart as these people. Maybe engineering's not for me. And I'm in my first year classes, which are nothing like what engineers really do. And so for me, in my experience, it was joining my college's Formula SAE team, the car team. And I was not a car person either. It just felt really technical and scary and worth a shot. And it was getting to build things that for me built that confidence back. And I got to learn how to weld, which like I had never done before. I don't think I knew anyone who knew how to weld. And it was so empowering to sort of work with people, build something, have it all come together at the end. And I think that sort of confidence building is what we try to do for our really little ones. I feel very lucky that I kind of fell into that. And I think when you talk to so many people in our field, there is that element of luck, right? Someone talked to you at the right time, someone told you to study this, or you met someone who had a career you thought was cool. And so in our approach, we're really just trying to remove luck from the equation, make sure every kid has that lucky moment because someone from SparkShop is there to say, hey, you could do this if you want to. Have you heard of this job? That's our approach.
I love that. I have to use a quote from my friend Drew Crow, who says, genius does not have a bias, but opportunity does.
Yes.
And you're trying to kind of sway that a little bit. You touched on confidence, and I think there's another thing we need to talk about when we talk about education, STEM, and students, and that's teacher confidence. Can you talk a little bit about professional development for teachers? Because I think it's one of the big obstacles that we look at is sometimes the students take to the tech quicker than the teachers do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The teacher confidence is so key. And when we look at elementary school, it is really low. So there was a study of college students and around STEM confidence. And the major with the lowest STEM confidence was elementary education, right? So these are folks who are responsible for teaching everything to these young students, and they don't have that strength. And what we also see is a teacher's lack of confidence is contagious to their students, disproportionately among girls. So girls are noticing their teacher feeling a little apprehensive with math, feeling a little scared. And what they're taking in is, this is too hard for my teacher, right? This smart person who is educating me is struggling. And all of those implicit messages bury themselves really, really deep. So a huge part of our thinking is how do we make a lasting investment, not just in these students, but in these teachers? And it's really similar, right? It's showing them how much or how many skills they have that can tie to STEM learning. And the word engineering is showing up in our new science standards as early as kindergarten, which can be terrifying. But what engineering means in kindergarten is like build a tower of blocks, and when it falls down, figure out why and try again, try to build it better. It is so simple, and it is the kind of stuff our teachers have been doing. And when I mentioned, right, teachers are so used to iterating and they're so used to user-centered design and they're so used to creating things for their classroom because they are so constrained by budgets and time and everything. So we really go in and try to show them these are all the ways that you're practicing the engineering design cycle, right? These are all the ways you can support your students in doing that. And that confidence and excitement becomes contagious, and teachers will naturally spread that to every part of the school day. I mean, I think we can look at schools now and think how different it is to have a STEM class, but all of us made dioramas, right? Like we all did prototypes in social studies. And there are connections to that, that as long as they are aware of what they're doing and we can connect that, they can make that connection for their students.
Thank you so much, Shanali, for sharing. You have such an amazing journey, the incredible way that you're working to build a more diverse and innovative STEM future. Workforce is just amazing. And if you have any questions for Shanali, drop those in the chat, and we're going to bring on Shireen. And Shireen, you've pioneered this groundbreaking initiative that empowers deaf and hearing impaired children with the skills to thrive in a digital age. And your work's already impacted over 16,000 participants in the US and internationally, which is just mind blowing. So knowing a little bit about your inspiration, can you talk a little bit about being the parent of a child that's born with something that could be seen as a disadvantage, or creating barriers for your child?
So I am like majority of society where I did not have experience with the disability community. I was I am a hearing speaking person that was not well versed in, or even just even that level of consciousness of, you know, uh, anybody with a disability. Like, you just go about your life and you don't even realize how disenfranchised or how the ecosystem is so broken until it hits your home. And that can be anybody at any age. And what is also really, you know, um, important to note is that unlike other segments of society, rather it's socioeconomic, racial, rural, urban, the disability community is the one community that all of us can belong to in the blink of an eye. So there is no us versus them, like we are them and they are us. And so obviously, because of my own experience with my child, the amount of, you would see that there is a very negative connotation associated with the word disability. But I think it's important to understand that over 70% of disabilities are invisible. They're not always people with a prosthetic limb. They're not always people in a wheelchair. They're not always people that outwardly you can see clearly that they have a disability. And I think that that's important to note when we're talking about that, is that it's not a one size fits all. And even under any disability, there is a huge spectrum. So it's not a one size fits all, category for a community. It is a cornucopia of everything you can imagine and then some. And, what it really was the chip on my shoulder that got me to start the organization. It was not a dream of mine to become a founder or any such thing. Like, my background is liberal arts. I studied political science. My life's plan was intended to go in a very different direction. And it was until, my son started reaching puberty that I really went into panic. That the idea that, because the world doesn't bend towards accessibility, but I knew that for some reason, I just had this idea that STEM was probably the most accessible. And particularly if we're talking about engineering, technology, design thinking skills, like our population is brilliant at problem solving. Absolutely incredible. I mean, imagine you're going through your whole life navigating in systems and institutions that are not designed for you. So who is going to be the most incredible problem solver through their lived experience? It's going to be our population. So that was number one. And I didn't need data. I didn't need, standardized tests to tell me that there is a capacity for greatness in this population, you know? Um, and so the idea of technology is low hanging fruit because our first principle is that the digital age is a great equalizer, particularly when we think about um, you know manufacturing as increasingly digitized, very technology heavy, robotic heavy, 3D printing and cybersecurity and all of these things that every other sector relies on more than ever before. The projection and the need of technology skills in these sectors have never been of a greater demand. So I see that as an opportunity. I mean, imagine, I think the Federal Chamber of Commerce said that the amount of unemployed people with a disability, if they were to be engaged in workforce development, it would increase the economy by $25 billion.
Hmm.
So you have that money sitting on the table, that's being untapped. And important to also note that there's so many workforce development initiatives that would benefit companies by investing in people with disability and training and tax credits and hiring. So there is so much opportunity that is not being, taken advantage of at the level that it should. I mean, and what's so interesting about this conversation is that in the recent couple of years, we've actually been putting a very heavy emphasis on, you know, um, creating ecosystems and building partnerships in manufacturing, um, and our community, like offering a day of manufacturing. In fact, one of our lead facilitators is a um, is an engineering student at UT Austin, but she is a certified welder. And she also like has been doing like welding dives in Houston, underwater welding. And she was, born deaf. And by the way, fun note, she also was the first deaf woman to win Miss Austin.
Wow.
Oh, she's like
She's
that.
unstoppable.
She's a badass at another level. Like, I mean, she's fire. Um, so again, just like all our facilitators, when you were talking about earlier with our other panelists about the power of role models, that cannot be understated. Like that you have no idea what it matters to a child that is isolated, that has nobody in their family that may be deaf or with a disability, the level of isolation, the already lack of STEM education opportunities in their school, mostly because of bias and low expectation. And so our kids, by virtue of diagnosis, already end up being thrown to the bottom of the list of resources, investment, and so many other things. So our organization, unfortunately, is one of very few organizations that promote STEM to students with disabilities. I mean, and I'll give you an example of like a workshops that we commonly do, because we do STEM kits, we do teacher training, we advise companies on, best practices. I mean, just all kinds of things. But one of the main staple, projects that we do with our students is we have them build and create a prototype, with circuits and sensors and soldering, wires together. And we do it in a very like abstract way. We deliberately try to keep things abstract. So it's like, okay, this is a DC motor and this is a battery pack and these are LED lights, and okay, now figure out the right way to configure them together. Okay, now here's a pile of trash. Now create a prototype, build a robot, build a machine, build something that's workable, and then demo it for us. So we like go through like these huge, fast paced sprints. And now imagine these are kids that have never done anything even remotely similar to this. And it's just dazzling, like the things that they come up with. I mean, we had, just of course, there are thousands of students, but one I can think of was he built his own accessible doorbell, you know and he demoed it, and he was like, because we can't hear the doorbell, but
Right.
this would help create, flashing lights in the house and things like that. I mean, so the level of innovation, because who's going to be the better problem solver for yourself? It's going to be you, because you are the subject matter expert of the challenges that you face. So don't depend on society, don't depend on people that don't have the lived experiences or issues that you face. Don't depend on anybody to create the solutions that you need in your life. You have the ability to be the creator, to solve your own problems, as well as what may benefit society.
I love it. And I sit on the board for Uniquely Abled Project. And I think one of the things that we often don't see is that individuals with disabilities have unique and inherent other abilities that are superpowers that come to light. And we're generally working with people with a neurodiverse diagnosis, but their ability to hyperfocus is such a talent when we're looking at manufacturing and quality assurance and precision and inspection. And I think it's really important that when we talk about opportunities, and you've talked about the universal language of computing, how do you think learning these skills can help deaf children access just more overall opportunities in education and workforce development?
Well, I think one of the catalysts and the reason why we've been able to continue doing the work is because of the level of motivation from within the community. I mean, I cannot even tell you how many adults from within the community that would be support staff or from within a school would come up to us after one of our sessions and say, wow, how different my life would have been if I had had this experience. Because we encourage them to learn alongside our students as an informal training model. I mean, that in itself should tell you so much. And I think the last data showed that students with disabilities and mainstream education programs, only 10% have access to STEM classes.
Wow.
So it is a very deeply embedded, broken ecosystem. But then again, we do have a new generation of technologists. We have deaf founders that are building like AI models. I mean, so it's not like, if we had talked about this 25, 30 years ago, we would still be where we're at, which motivates us even further to remain steadfast in that, now we have, one deaf rocket scientist, and now we have one of this and one of this, and now we have two. But why not have 5 and 10 and 20? Because it's all completely possible, and it's just a lack of opportunity. So one of our values for our organization is zero barrier to access. And though we're not a heavy duty, funded organization, but all of our programming is always free and no cost, because we don't want to create more hardship and more barriers to institutions, to educators and parents and students to bring in these experiences.
I love it. And I know that you've reached over 60 locations now. You've impacted those thousands of participants, but what challenges have you really faced in scaling Deaf Kids Code? How have you overcome those? And how can people get engaged if they maybe have a hearing impaired or deaf child that they want to see more opportunities for?
There are several challenges. Number one, imagine we've existed since 2015 and we get rejected on STEM grants left hand over fist. So that tells you so much that we have not moved the needle from a investment perspective, that a lot of corporations and institutions and companies in general just don't see us as a worthy investment. And that's why I, started by saying that the chip on my shoulder is as a result of a multitude of things. And that is also one of them. Secondly, you have, workforce development training centers, and they also lack the will to want to partner with organizations like us, and I don't understand why. I feel like, companies also have to want to endorse these things to put more pressure and saying, well, that, I mean, there isn't a labor shortage. There's not a labor shortage. The problem is that we keep repeating and looking into the same pool of communities, and we're not looking where other people are not. And I can tell you that the amount of talent, dedication, I think, there was, recently, a couple of years ago, there was a white paper that was published, on, productivity among hiring people with disabilities. Needless to say, the results were magnificent. Um, but again, there seems to be a societal bias in which, I think that people just, they have not broadened their horizons, and I would encourage them to partner with organizations like ours. If you have, if you are fascinated and interested in investing in STEM in your communities, well, we're all over the country. And it's not because we promoted ourselves all over the country, by the way. Like, we have scaled to this level because of word of mouth, because there are so few organizations that do what we do, that it's spread organically, which is crazy.
Well, and thank you, Shireen. And this is a great opportunity for us to get out more that your organization is here and you're really looking to lead the way on reshaping opportunities for the deaf and hard of hearing community. So thank you for the work you're doing and that you continue to do as well. Last up here, we're going to touch base with John. And John, you've had kind of a fascinating journey from a family of inventors to working on the space shuttle program and now coordinating Bird Inc. program across Alabama. Your experience spans such a wide variety of industries. You've even held patents along the way. So what has motivated you to really move into youth outreach with Bird Inc. And how does that kind of tie back to your personal and professional experiences as well?
Well, Bird Inc. happened. I was hired. I got my degree when I was 39 years old. It changed my life. And I got a position at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, to manage tech transfer for the state of Alabama, Northern Alabama, and South Tennessee by visiting industry to see if there was technology NASA had produced that could help them be better in producing their products. So I was thrust into meeting industry all over that region. And as a result of that, at that same time, while I'm visiting all these industries and seeing all these opportunities, I'm the ice age squirrel that sees a nut, and I see nuts everywhere. So I'm just, all this stuff's going on in my head. Then my boss came to me, Dr. Schroer, and he goes, "We just won this grant from the school to work program from Clinton. And it sounds like your story, John, how you came from a manufacturing family, a hippie, to rocket scientist with patents. Can you do something with that?" I go, "Yeah, I can do something with that." So that's how Bird Inc. happened. The 15-minute factory, I tell my story. It's just telling my story. And my story is, I was a young person like you with no clue what I wanted to do. And but I kept putting everything I was learning became a tool in my tool bag. And then then I found myself here. Also, education had to go with experience and knowledge to become practical, and that's how Bird Inc. Happened 30 years ago.
Tony, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. I was getting a little bit of feedback on John. I'm like, oh, maybe it's me. So then I muted myself and didn't unmute myself. So, John, you've had a varied background. First and foremost, thank you for your service in the Army and as well with NASA. And I know that, you know, creating Bird Inc. was kind of a culmination of all of those different things. But what challenges did you face along the way in really kind of shifting your focus towards that youth education?
Well, Tony, I don't really think it was hard. It was like, it was a story that needed to be told because I felt like that child that they're talking about. I mean, but I'm not in a not addressed group of people. I'm white, okay? I'm the other people. But nobody seemed to care about where I was going or helping me. I wasn't getting mentored in any way, family or not, you know. My parents were trying to make a living. We had 7 kids. I mean, it was like everybody was out for themselves, you know. So I just muddled my way through it, and but then I thought, if I can tell, I think people can relate to my story of how difficult it is, but don't give up and see everything that happens in your life as something you can use somewhere along the line to help you be better for the next thing you're going to do.
I love that. And I know because I've had the experience of being in the classroom with students, it all changes when it's hands-on. And I firmly believe making something builds confidence, no matter what age you are, whether you're baking cookies with your mom in the kitchen or you're making a rocket ship. Making is a way to really build confidence. Can you talk a little bit about introducing to students to manufacturing kind of that hands-on immersive way and how you feel like that method really makes an impact on them for engaging with that STEM moment?
Well, you know my history that the program Bird Inc. started 30 years ago. It went away after about 8 years of success, and I didn't even know it. I went into business for myself, started a company, got a bunch of investment, and then I got called back into the industry business again, into engineering, and worked on the James Webb Telescope. And Dr. Harris called me. He was an associate of mine 30 years ago, and he goes, "Hey, the Department of Defense has a national problem, and they don't have a pipeline of educated and trained STEM people to do the things using the advanced technology." And I told him about your program, Bird Inc., and how successful it was in Alabama. And I go, I didn't even know it was a success. He said, yeah, they were having to turn children away from the 2-year colleges and the trade schools. I go, well, that's nice to know. So they gave me a pilot program. That's 1,000 students I talked to last year. And we had an 87% approval rate, wanting more of it. And now I'm challenged to talk to 28,000 kids.
Well, and it sounds like you're either going to have to clone yourself or you're going to have to train others to be able
That's-
to do this with you as well. Can you
Yeah.
talk about how you really do ensure, and Shanali touched on this too, the quality of the program as it grows?
That, you know, that's the biggest deal. Okay. Fortunately, Dr. Harris let me run the thing the way I want to, because that's what made it successful. And I believe the key to this is people like ourselves and Ellie and the others that tell their stories, that people can see themselves as those people. So when I go into the classroom and I look at them and I go, I'm here to help you be successful. And they look at me and they go, well, I don't know, Mr. John, I don't know you from anywhere and you're not related to me. Why do you even care that I succeed? Because you are the future. I know that for sure, because I was sitting in that chair at one time, no clue what I was going to do or where I was going to go. But I know now that I need to help you succeed so you can be in that future yourself.
And so how do you take your passion and make sure that you're training the people that will be delivering the program that aren't you, to really kind of ensure that you keep that passion driving the reason that Bird Inc. is running?
Well, I found this, Tony, to be the main thing is I can't make that person. You find that person. You have 3 of them before me on this program. Well, it just happened to me. This is Friday, right? Wednesday, I was in a group of people doing the pathway to put a proposal to the to the governor of Alabama. And an assistant principal of the high school in that town asked me if he could be on my team. That's how I find them. They want to quit 30 years of education and coaching to be one of those people that I am to do this for the state of Alabama. That's how I find them.
I
That's
love that.
how we ensure it.
And with Bird Inc., you're doing kind of a factory simulation where students are all kind of taking on different roles. Why do you think it's so important to introduce concepts like teamwork and business principles and problem solving for these students in the middle school environment?
I think our school system has been locked into always the way they're doing it, and the least way that I saw a 1975 survey that said the least effective way of passing on education or information is by hearing or lecture and then hearing. Okay, that's what we do all through school for 12 years. Okay, why are we using the worst way of communicating to them when if you involve everything, project-based learning, they'll retain 85% versus 10%. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I think it really does. It makes a difference, especially I think for engaging young men sometimes to get them up and moving and doing things makes a difference in the way they learn. I see it between my two kids. I have a son and a daughter that it's like a world of difference in just the way that they learn.
Yes.
And especially in that middle school age group where they're more concerned about what their peers think of them than they are what we think of them or how they're learning or what they're doing. So I know obviously you're looking to expand beyond just Alabama. What do you see as the biggest challenge in trying to roll Bird Inc. out on a national scale?
I don't think it's finding the people. It's the community's understanding how important manufacturing is. So I put it very simple when I'm talking to sixth graders to try to inspire them. I go, you're sitting here and everything that you see and it's involved in this room right now has been manufactured by somebody. If we didn't have manufacturing, we would be sitting here without any clothes in the dirt. Literally, everything goes away. Manufacturing is what makes America great and different than the rest of the world. It gives us a prosperous and expanding middle class and opportunities and lots of things that we like to have. It's manufacturing that does that.
And in what ways can other corporations, educators, community organizations kind of support the growth of programs like Bird Inc. to help really inspire this next generation?
I think that's a great question. I am honored that the Department of Defense is funding me for the next 2 years. But when the funding federal went away 30 years ago, our interest in the success of our children went away with it. The grassroots has to happen. And that's what I found when I was Wednesday in Oxford, Alabama. Renee was in charge of the STEM Council for the governor, was figuring out a way that we could expand that program. And what happened in Oxford, Alabama is the parents, the teachers, the workforce development people, and the government said, we have got to do this for our kids and their future. But they said, we don't have enough people in Oxford, Alabama. We only have like 300 seniors, in our high school. So they teamed together with 5 other counties to write some proposals. And now they own a manufacturing facility that was Hewlett Packard. And they have classes there that to 6 county schools come in. And when they walk into the facility, they are now an employee. It is absolutely amazing. So we're doing that. And I made a point to them. I said, and they had 7th to 12th grade was their target. I was sitting in a small group of committee and we're going, we want to change any of this. So I said, and the other lady, April, who was next to me, I go, we need to start at K. So I appreciate what was said before about 4th grade. I'm excited you got that going. I want to go to kindergarten.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, especially when we're looking at STEM identity is crafted so early. John, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story, your vision for Bird, and we'll look to see how Bird continues to spread its wings across the U.S. Did you see what I did there? I'm known for my puns. So what we're going to do is we're going to have all of our amazing panelists join us on screen. Now we're going to ask a couple of questions. And if you have any questions for our amazing panelists today, please feel free to drop those in the chat. And what we're going to do is now we're going to open it up and talk a little bit about real world impact. So Obviously, we've heard what inspired all of you to get engaged. We know that we need to start younger, but can you share specific examples, anecdotes, or stories of how your programming has directly impacted a young person? Because I think this is kind of where the rubber hits the road, is like, let's hear the stories of how this actually changed. So anybody can unmute first and go ahead. We'll kind of do a round robin and see who wants to share some stories from out in the field.
I've got a recent one that's been really fun. So we did a partnership with one of our 4th and 5th grade schools and Northwestern University. They have a freshman engineering class everyone has to take where it's like designing something for a client. And the challenge we gave them was to create something so that our little ones could safely cut cardboard, because cardboard's an amazing prototyping tool, but scissors don't really do it. X-Actos aren't safe. So it's not really like within the reach of our students without pretty expensive tools. So we asked the college students to come up with some stuff, and they came and did a like user testing field trip to our elementary school. And these kids, let's see, it was like early spring, so they're halfway through their first year at college. They're so stressed. It's midterm time. They bring all of their different prototypes, and the little ones like couldn't quite use it quite as well. Like some of them were great, but some they just hadn't anticipated the strength, the motor control, like what it is to be in 4th and 5th grade. A lot of the prototypes broke, which like we know happens. And these college students were sweating. They were so stressed out. And at the end, the kids are giving them feedback, which is something they practice a lot in our program. So the little ones are very used to failure and very used to supporting each other and giving feedback. So I had asked, is there anything else you want to say before these engineers leave? And one of the 5th graders raised his hand and said, all of these prototypes are really creative. I liked how different they were. A lot of them didn't work, but I'm proud of you and I think you should keep trying. And it was so precious. These college students were so taken aback. They were so uncomfortable. They were like really struggling with the failure. And it was really beautiful to see a 10-year-old model like what it means to be supportive and how much you're not judged for your failure, and how just like leaps and bounds ahead they were than these successful college students. It was really, really magical to see that side by side.
I love that. And it's funny, I've heard another story of there was a female engineer came in and was talking to 2nd graders who were participating in a STEM program that identified all the students as design thinkers and engineers and entrepreneurs. And the person, the visitor says, I'm an engineer, and a 2nd grader raises her hand and says, I'm an engineer too. That's so cool. Like, oh, you're an engineer. I'm an engineer. So I think it's great that we can start to lay that work out there, that failure is an option. There's iterations. Design thinking is great. And I go back to, I have a baseball cap that actually says Spark Shop loves you. So I know that there's also the feeling out there for kids that they feel really nurtured in these STEM environments. Cara, I'm going to open it up to you. Could you talk a little bit about an anecdotal story or feedback that you've gotten from somebody knowing that you've had that impact for them?
Yeah, so a lot of great impact. One of our biggest impact stories that I like to share is one of our college students. She's now a junior. She's about to enter into nursing school. When she was a junior in high school, she was told that she couldn't even should consider to go to a 4-year university because during the pandemic, she started to slip a little bit. And so she was told to consider community college. And so she was really convinced that she could not ever go to a 4-year university. So with our college prep portion of our program, we spent 8 months working with her to convince her that she could. And through those works, she was able to get accepted into 5 universities. And with the support of our organization, she was able to go to her school, which is Texas Lehman University, on a full ride scholarship support. So those are the type of stories that we're faced with when taking those no's and turning them to yeses. And so our program have done a lot of great work with that.
And that damage is so hard to undo when somebody's told that they're not capable. I remember my daughter, she was told in 2nd grade, math is hard, and she really internalized that. So in 3rd grade, when she was identified as gifted, then 5th grade, she got the highest score they'd ever seen in a math score in our school district. But she's in 8th grade now, and she'll still tell you she's not good at math. Because in 2nd grade, somebody told her math is hard. Not math can be hard, but I'm going to show you how to figure it out. So I think undoing some of that damage that sometimes happens with bias and stereotypes is really, really hard. So I applaud you for the work that you're doing. John, have you had any fun stories of students that have maybe looked at what STEM careers might look like after experiencing the birding program? John caught himself not muted before I did.
Yeah, I want to brag on the most important one because I've practiced STEM with my 4 children. Now my youngest is 40 and my oldest will be 48. And now I do it with my grandkids. So I'm going to use a grandchild. She was born preemie and they didn't even know she was going to live. And then there's always the concerns that go with that. You know, you may understand that, Shireen, that there's, you know, things don't develop and all that. So she had the math thing. We heard about the math. And my daughter, who's a graduate, thought, I mean, she was pulling her hair out, thought she was never going to learn how to do math. Now she is the top math person. She's 12 years old now, 13, just turned 13. And she's top in her class in math. She wants to be an astronaut. So I got a picture of her 5 years ago when I was putting this into her brain. She has her Halloween costume on in a NASA outfit. You know, she wants to be one that goes to Mars. So what I'm saying is I'm going back to what Shanali was saying. She's 4th grade. I've been mentoring my grandchildren as well as everybody that I can talk to. As soon as I see them as young as they are, I am telling them they can, and that's what I believe. I don't like using labels. I think, Kara, you understand that, and Shireen especially, and Shanali, all of you. When I go into a classroom, I want you to succeed. This doesn't matter color, size, length, handicap, nothing. You all can be fantastic, and we need what you are going to be to make this place called America and the world better. I believe in every one of you.
Thank you. Perfect. And then Shireen, last but not least, can you tell a story? Even if I was going to say I have to say, I love that you're just like a total mama bear and you're like, nope, I'm going to block and tackle everything along the way. And if we don't have a program that's going to work for my child, I'm going to create a program that will work for my child. Will you tell us a little success story?
Yeah. So when institutions fail, you create the institution, right? And I think all of my fellow brilliant panelists can agree with that. There are so many. I mean, just recently, so we have ongoing programming with the Chicago Park District Deaf Hard of Hearing program. And we had a session on, creating an app. And so we use this really beautiful, very, accessible, curriculum. And we had a kid that didn't even follow along like our instructions. Like he went rogue almost instantly, which we love anarchists. We love nonconformity. We encourage it. We reward it. And he was just like on fire. And he went to school and he's one of the only deaf kids in his class. And he demoed his app the next week at school. We had a student that, imagine this, he was adopted from China, deaf, had been in an orphanage. And I met him in his first year ever in school, like ever. He was 10, had never been in a classroom. Now, this is a very extreme example. And again, as I was saying, that we have our students build prototypes. So, we showed, how DC motors work and, and servos and all of these things. And he built a prototype of an airplane that he rode on to come to America. It's crazy how expressive and how much can be expressed through these type of experiences that transcend so much, right? Even my own child, are you kidding me? I mean, he's now 20 and he's studying applied physics and quantum computing at Purdue University. And this is a kid that I didn't even know. I believed in him. I knew his greatness was in him. But the way we measure ability is a very one-dimensional, very narrow viewpoint on who is a good test taker and who isn't. And we know, all of us, the panelists know, how complex problem solving and, precision is required to build out these projects. But these kids don't know that because we're not emphasizing on measuring, and it's a very wide open, expansive, creative process. And then they build it, and then we tell them, you know what? Engineering students at universities use the same tools as you just did. And here you go. And that's where the belief system, because I'll always say that if there's one thing we sell is a belief system. That's what we're selling. We're selling it to the educators. We're selling it to our students. We're selling it to our parents that look at what they just did.
And I think
Because
we
you
need to
can't
look,
deny, because you can't deny what you just did.
and I think the next step is selling it to industry, right? Selling it to industry that these individuals all deserve a chance. And Shireen, before I move on, I have to tell you, I was just at a conference and there were two rocket scientists, right? Quantum physician, like PhDs, like the most brilliant people. I was like, I really want to get them at a cocktail party because their brains were like brilliant. And to hear like what they're doing and what they're doing with quantum physics and shooting lasers at neurons and atoms and creating quantum clocks that they're then flying around to England. It was absolutely mind blowing. So bravo for you for supporting your son to get there. And obviously for that amazing genetics that you have, the smarts that get, I left that meeting and I was like, I feel like I need to go back to school because I do not feel like the brightest bulb right now after that conversation. But I think before we turn it over, we do have a question from the audience. But before we go to that question, how are you advocating or teaching these students that are coming through your programs on how to advocate for themselves in manufacturing when it doesn't look like them? Cara, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, so we call it our bulletproof method. So what that means to us is that, falling in love with your discipline. Like for me, I love being a chemical engineer. There's nothing else rather in the world that I'd rather be doing, right? And so we teach them to fall in love with what it is that they love to do. And no matter what obstacles they face, whatever may happen or they may encounter in engineering or in their world that they go into, we prepare them enough where it just bounce off of them, where they can focus on loving and just doing what it is that they love to do. That's what I did for my own self in my career. So we just make sure we share our stories, help them understand what it is that we've experienced, and just hope for a better journey for them. And we do a lot of stuff like this to encourage that. But really, just our bulletproof method is what we do with our members.
I love that. Shanali, what do you do to help reinforce that confidence for students that are looking to go into engineering programs or out into industry as well?
Yeah, so we really change the approach as they get older. And our bread and butter is fourth and fifth grade, where we can be all about interest and confidence. But we have a couple alumni programs that are more experimental to support kids as they get older. And we did a high school internship last summer that was really aimed at students who were like curious about STEM, but not positive, not certain of their direction yet. And that was much more focused on preparing them for all the gatekeeping that happens, right? We can be very optimistic and smiley and lovey when they're really little, but then it's going to be a culture shock when they enter these spaces, much like how Cara was talking about going from an HBCU into industry, right? It's like, wait, this is not what I was sold when we were talking about how amazing and changing and vibrant STEM can be. So we get those kids much more prepared for like breezing through an interview, right? Projecting what you need to get into those spaces, navigating those cultures, so that we had panels of engineers who are representative of our students talking about what it's like to be in a professional environment when you have an accent, right? What you have to deal with from the perceptions of others, how you can carry yourself. And they start to form those peer networks before they're in those spaces where we all find so much support when you're from a marginalized identity. But it's just kind of growing up how we talk to them, right?
Yeah, I love it. Shireen, how are you helping your participants of your program really be ready to go into industry and stand on their own and be brave and be proud and be strong and know that they're able?
It's very complicated for us because we're not dedicated in one particular city. And so we rely on the educators and the institution to properly guide our kids, but also to embed more STEM-based programming within their schools. So the thing is that it's complex because educators are leaving the field in droves. So you have high turnover rates, but we do have many schools that have started, robotics clubs, although what we do is not robotics. And we'll have kids tell us like, oh, I tried the Vex robotics, but this is way better for me. Like, I love this. I could do this all day. So I think like it's also based on the approach. We know that who teaches plays a very, very big role in, the motivation of the student, because it's one thing to train a teacher on curriculum, but it's another thing to have that fire, to pass it on, which we all understand that you're only as strong as your weakest link in your community. And all you need is, one person that really lacks the growth mindset, and it's over before it began. Um, but part of like continuing to cultivate that interest is we do like, distance virtual STEM programs. So we'll mail in equipment to a classroom where the students will, build a project that is led by one of our facilitators. And so we've had to do things very creatively as a way to keep things going. And of course, mentorship in advising parents and students and educators on opportunities in their area. But it is challenging because, there is an advantage if you're dedicated in one city. If you're only located in Alabama, if you're only located in Houston, or you're only located in, Chicago, that's easier to build an ecosystem because you're in people's faces and they can't slam the door on you because they know they're going to run into you, right? It's like, so there's a different level of accountability that you can have versus us being so widespread. But I mean, but we have schools that have started maker spaces and coding clubs, and, you know, um, a lot of beautiful things have come as a result of this, but you have to remember at the same time, we've done programming in schools that can't even find Scotch tape.
Yeah. And then last but not least, John, how are you helping to really kind of keep that love of STEM and excitement about manufacturing alive for students after they've experienced your program?
The key, I think, Kara and Shanali, all of them have, if I put it in one bundle, we need to start as soon as possible. It has to be a narrative all the way that we change the paradigm that manufacturing is hard, sweaty, and dirty. It's not. It is completely different. Go into a factory and find out. See what's going on, okay? That has to happen. What I'm seeing, because my funding is saying, if you're successful in Alabama, we want to turn it into a national program, okay? I think Shireen brought it up, okay? You're in this place and that place and that place, and you can manage it pretty good. What I am going to do, and why I'm glad I'm here, I want you to be on where people are looking at what I'm doing on my website as a resource, going, you have handicapped or underserved, and that's what you need to do. You know, Kara, Shanali, Shireen, I want to be a resource that you go to if you're interested in STEM on a national basis. These are the kind of programs that are changing their communities. Let's all know what those communities are doing, and let's not reinvent the wheel and spend all this money doing things over again in every single town. Does that make sense? That's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. Perfect. And then the question that we have from Millie, if anybody else has questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, is does anyone also help highlight aptitudes in STEM? So often students may not see that they have an aptitude for STEM until it's uncovered in an aptitude assessment, not just interest. Does anybody have tools for that?
So we don't have a tool for that. We do more of a tool of guidance on careers, like so to help them find their matches when it comes to a STEM career. But I have spoke to this before. I spoke to the Gifted and Talented program here in Texas. And certain questions that I told them to do was, and I wasn't in G&T at all, was that you just kind of have to probe the students right in the room. Like I was a very quiet student in the back of the room, really understanding your students, really getting to understand what their interests may be is what I would suggest. But we focus mostly on testing to understand what their STEM career fit is.
Anyone else before I turn it over to Chantel? Oh, Shanali, go ahead.
Yeah, I would add that like we try to be really broad or try to encourage folks in industry to reconsider like what is a predictor of aptitude in STEM and what really are the aptitudes we look for. Because for so long we've just screened it by, were you good at math and science in high school? And once you're in these fields, now it suddenly becomes like how good are you at thinking outside the box? How good are you under pressure solving a problem, communicating a different idea to others? Tons of kids have those skills and those aptitudes that aren't being shown like, hey, actually, we really need that in STEM, right? We see companies really struggle if all they have is a bunch of kids who are great at calculus, right? 20 years ago. So I think getting more specific as you look around your office and in your workforce at like what are the actual aptitudes we demand of people, and then calling that out in young people is something we try to do.
I love it. And I cannot thank you all enough for your time, your dedication, the groundbreaking, innovative, world-changing work that you are doing. And I'm going to hand it back over to my colleague, Chantel, to close us out today. But thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I'm blown away by all that you are all doing. It's just inspiring, and I'm beyond appreciative of your time. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today. I do want to bring your attention as SME will be continuing to celebrate Manufacturing Month with several upcoming programs. All are open to members and non-members. So I do want to call to attention our October 16th Shop Talk Diversity and Career Pathways, where John will be joining us on that program. And then on October 30th, we're going to be focusing on women driving manufacturing forward. And then we will be diving a little bit deeper with several of our panelists today in fireside chats. On October 9th will be Shireen, October 23rd, Kara, and November 6th with Shanali. And finally, we have one additive manufacturing coffee chat on October 29th. And you can find all of this information and register by going to the SME Manufacturing Day landing page, and that's sme.org/engage/manufacturing-day. Again, thank you so much. I want to make one quick little plug. I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't. If you are not already an SME member, we invite you to join us, and you get to save up to 20% by signing up today with code JOIN24. Use the link sme.org/join24. It is in the chat box as well. Thank you again, Tony, and our panelists today for this amazing webinar. Thank you, Kara, Shanali, Shireen, and John for sharing your insights and how we all can play a part in furthering not only the discussion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also how can we use these principles to attract and retain a diverse talent pool. We hope you continue this important conversation and join us for upcoming events the rest of the month. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much again for joining us.